This is BIV Today, the daily video show and podcast from the journalists at BIV. I'm Haley Wooden. As we know, many bricks and mortar retailers were struggling pre-pandemic, as were many walls up against the convenience and selection of e-commerce. And then, of course, COVID-19 happened. So where does this leave us, and what does this mean for the future of the mall? My guest today is going to talk about just that. Marty Weintraub is a partner and national retail leader with Deloitte Canada. The firm has just put out a new report on this very topic. Marty, great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'll put this to you. What is the future of the mall? Will we have malls in the future, or will they look pretty different from what we have now?
Well, so a couple of things. So yes, we'll have malls going into the future, and they will over time start to look very different. I mean, if we step back, one thing we saw for sure in our research was malls were challenged way before the pandemic. So a metric we often look at is footfall or foot traffic into a mall. And when we looked at 2019 versus 2018, we saw about a 22% drop in foot traffic already coming into malls in Canada. When we looked at that in February of this year over February of last year, which is just weeks before the lockdown, that drop was 45% about.
Wow.
So we had another major drop, and then the pandemic hit and malls shut. So if you kind of go back in time and think about the trajectory, it was already not looking great. And so now you introduce the pandemic and the fear of, only about half of Canadians feeling comfortable and safe going out to a store. You can now see the challenge. So we've got a lot of landlords and retailers kind of huddling in the boardroom, looking at their 5-year plans and trying to shrink them down to, 5 weeks or 5 months to try to figure out, what do? We got to bring the shopper back. So when we did our study, we talked to Canadians and tried to understand, what do they expect? What do they want to see from a mall of the future? And that's what our report was based on.
Tell me a little bit about what that looks like. I know at one point in time, malls were the most convenient option. That has obviously changed with the rise of e-commerce. And I think it's fair to say during the pandemic, we've seen e-commerce trends accelerate, and they're probably not going back to where they were. So how can malls innovate and adjust for the competition?
Yeah, so I mean, you raise a good point. So just to give you another interesting statistic about, before the pandemic, about 24% of Canadians said we go to a mall once a week. They said post-pandemic, they see that going down by half. So just to
Wow.
kind of back to that traffic, I mean, even going forward now, so you can kind of see, the slope's not so good. So the kind of 5 big things that Canadians said they're looking for. So number one, you got to keep me safe, and it's got to be convenient. So that doesn't go away. That's back to my safety component. So we're going to start to see everything from hygiene, cleaning, all those types of activities at, whether it's stores or landlords or malls, and then they got to communicate that. It's one thing to do it, it's another thing to make me believe it's true. So focusing on that safety and hygiene is number one. The second will be the role of the store. So, the role of the store in the mall typically was about me coming to the mall, maybe alone, maybe with my kids, maybe with my partner to buy something, usually clothing or accessories. There's department stores and clothing stores for the most part in malls. And the role of those stores was to sell stuff. Well, now we're going to start to see malls be much more experiential. At least that's the hope. And that's going to take time. Back to my earlier comment, this is not going to happen overnight. Malls are expensive, they're big, they're hard to change. So this is going to take some time, and some malls will do it faster. Some malls will do it slower. Some malls won't do it and probably won't exist. But we will see a makeup and a shift in the makeup of what kind of stores and what kind of experiences a mall provides. So for example, think about community spaces, health and wellness, leisure, sort of other types of experiences other than just buying stuff. So that'll be a second shift. The third thing will be what we call make way for the food revolution. So your grandparents' food court, dead. It's been dying, it's dead. We don't want greasy cheeseburgers so much anymore. We want healthy food. We want local food. We want sustainable food. We want more luxurious food. Because now with people not wanting to go into malls and spend time there because of the safety, what can keep them coming to a mall would be food, because food is not something you can socially replicate online. So food will become a new traffic draw to the mall, but it'll have to be a very different looking food choice than what we have today. So that'll be the third thing. Fourth thing will be technology. We're going to start to see a lot more technology in malls, whether that's arranging for appointments, curbside pickup, virtual reality, and engaging with a store salesperson before you even leave your house, potentially doing a virtual tour of a store, maybe curating 2 or 3 tops or bottoms you want to buy, and then being ready for you when you show up to the store. So a lot more technology adoption. And I think, as I mentioned before, just becoming a whole new destination. I think, we actually in a report say we're not even sure it should be called a mall anymore. We may want to actually think about changing the name of that structure to be something different than it was in the past. So those are the 4 or 5 big shifts that are going to start happening as we speak.
Any suggestions on what would be a better fitting name for a
You
mall?
know, when I said that, I knew you were going to come back and say that. This is like putting my own foot in my mouth. No, we didn't explore that, and I got people much more creative than me on the team that can solve that one. But I think, you know, the real key message here is that the mall conjures up certain images, of the mall of the 80s, with a bunch of teenagers running around causing trouble and, in food courts. And I think part of rebranding of a mall needs to sort of consider not just who's going to come, but who's going to be in the mall from a merchant perspective. And I'll leave it up to people much smarter than me to come up with that name.
I know over the last number of years, we've seen malls renovate and invest to make a mall and a center for entertainment. So you'd go maybe do some shopping and then grab a meal at a full service restaurant and go and see a movie. Obviously, I think there's some questions around the future of movie theaters. Do you think that trend we've seen shifts more to the food side of things you were talking about and away from something like movie theaters?
Theaters is a really good. We actually spoke to one theater company as part of our interviews, and there's a lot of concern. I mean, if you look at before the pandemic, there was quite a bit of challenge. I mean, think about who the winners are during the pandemic. I mean, Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all of the new streaming services. I mean, where would we be if we didn't have our Netflix? And I mean, I don't know what you do at nighttime, but I know what I spend my evenings doing. And it's pretty much watching Netflix
Yep.
4 months and going strong right now. And the amount I don't even know where the content comes from, quite frankly. But I think that is going to be super hard to reverse. Now we're going to feel tension. We actually spoke to a couple of consumer psychologists as part of our research as well, and what we're starting to experience now, other than short-term depression and anxiety from being locked up in our homes, when that starts to unlock, like we're experiencing now, depending where you are in Canada, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, people will want to get back out very quickly. And we're starting to see that already. And unfortunately, with that will come, rises and falls in pandemics and waves. So I think a movie theater where you got to sit really close together, or if you spread them out, the economics go out the window, right? Because there's a certain number of what we call bums and chairs that got to be true for the P&L to be okay. I think there's going to be a significant challenge when you kind of add those ingredients together. That you can't have too many people together too close. We don't know how much longer the pandemic is with us. Netflix and Amazon and all the other streaming services are knocking it out of the park with content. You add that up together, that presents massive challenge for the theater business. So I think they as well will have to kind of rethink their business models, potentially repurpose or broaden the use cases for a theater and what a theater does. We started to see some of that happen, Haley, around sporting events, whether it's WWE or mixed martial arts. We're seeing theaters previously get redeployed for other things than just movies. But I think food is actually going to take on a much bigger role than theater.
Interesting. I'm curious, do you have any insight on what consumers generally prefer to buy physically in store and would not prefer to buy that online?
Yeah, I mean, we still see, and when we looked at our study, we actually asked that question in different categories. So most of the things that you need to live, think about food, household items, sort of like we call them commodities. Things where the brand may not be that important, or what brand you want, or you don't have to actually put it on, and sort of it's not fashion related. You don't have to see yourself in the mirror. That's clearly where most of the e-com business will continue to be strong. But even apparel, I mean, pre-pandemic, we saw about 78% of people want to buy apparel in a mall and in store. But actually, in our survey, that number dropped to just over 50%. That's a massive drop because apparel was one of the most stubborn sectors of retail to move digital, right? But as I mentioned before, with these new AR, VR experiences, even what you and I are doing right now, this virtual interview, this could absolutely be a retail interaction. You could be a sales associate in store ABC, and I could be a customer looking to buy something. And I say, Haley, can you take me around the store and can you show me what you have in blue shirts with button down or zip up or hoodies? And you'll take me around and you'll put them aside, as I mentioned. And all that will start to change. And I'll be very comfortable doing that because, quite frankly, I've now been forced to. I've been forced as a consumer to shop from my home and interact virtually in my home, whereas before I didn't have to. So I think we've now taught consumers, maybe we force taught them how to interact digitally, and a lot of that's going to stick. But there will still be people that want to go out back to that social interaction and that tension between I want to be safe, but I want to interact with people. That's still going to be true, just to a lesser extent.
Mm. I'm thinking of Walmart Canada's recent announcement that they're investing billions to upgrade their stores, to make pickup more accessible, to invest in omni-channel retailing. And I'm wondering if maybe that's an opportunity area for malls where you have large spaces. You could, in theory, have warehousing. You could have stores kind of serve as pickup locations as well as shop in store destinations. Is that an opportunity that was identified in the report?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we call it curbside is sort of the new thing. I mean, before pandemic, curbside existed, but it was at a very small scale. We had, buy online, pick up in store, kind of rolling out quickly across many retailers. But curbside is a whole new version. It's basically drive-through retail. And so the opportunity in a mall can be very exciting because think about a situation where a mall has dozens of retailers. You could go online and buy things from 5 different retailers, have the mall play a role with those retailers. Back to my point about they're huddling in the boardroom trying to figure out new ways to work. Well, one of those new ways could be around helping it make it easier for a customer to do curbside pickup, which now is an expectation, but do so across multiple competing retailers. So that when I buy something, I buy it all in one shot, and I can do curbside pickup in a mall from multiple retailers and returns. So malls can play a bigger return in making, play a bigger role in making returns easier. So if I have to go return something, make it easier for me to return it versus having to walk into the mall, park my car, take my kids with me. Can I do curbside returns, for example? So I think the notion of curbside and different fulfillment methods, as we say in retail, absolutely is here to stay. That's not going anywhere.
That's interesting. My final question for you, I'm picturing kind of a suburban mall in the middle of nowhere and thinking, who's going to drive out and make a trip to do that? But comparing that to, say, this future of a mall in an urban setting where you live there, you work there, and you go down foot traffic, much easier to acquire if people are spending all of their time above or next to a mall. Is that something that you think might be part of the future of a mall?
Yeah, I think there's going to be challenges, quite frankly, in both rural and urban, because in the city centers where most people came, people clearly live there, but it's the work traffic. So our office is in downtown Toronto, right next to the Eaton Center, for example, and I walk the Eaton Center, or used to walk the Eaton Center quite a bit, being a retail person, and with commercial real estate now in question itself because of the work from home and the remote working, there's going to be even a challenge for malls that are in downtown of large cities, much like there are already problems with malls that are sitting in tier two or smaller cities where just they weren't busy to begin with. So I think the problem is not just restricted to like urban versus rural. I think it's more of a how I want to shop issue versus where I shop. So whether it's about driving to the suburbs or walking out of my condo downtown into a mall like the Eaton Center, I think the whole thing is quite frankly up for rethink because we've all now been forced to think about how we want to interact with products and services going forward in a very different way than before.
Interesting. It's an interesting time, and it looks like we're in for an interesting future. Marty, thanks so much for coming on our show with your insight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's Marty Weintraub, partner and national retail leader with Deloitte Canada. You can find the report. It's linked to on this page, but also find it online if you're interested in learning more. This has been BIV Today. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow.